Hey guys, it's Andrea from VW Family Farm and welcome back to the kitchen with me. I'm actually sitting in my dining room and you can see the kitchen behind me, but I've got a video for you today that I think is going to be helpful. One of our first videos we put out was about sourdough because I love sourdough. I've been doing sourdough for several years. I formed the starter myself from yeasts and wild yeast I captured basically out of the air. You can do that by just mixing flour and water, keeping on dividing it and feeding your original starter that you keep. Anyway, maybe I'll do a video on that one of these days on how to start your own starter. But this is a video on the easiest sourdough bread in the world. So I'm going to show you how I make it. This is the things I love about it. There's 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. It's really good. It's what I would call like a rustic or like old world sourdough. There's a little place that makes sourdough a few hours from here that we've gotten it before. It's delicious. It rises really good and it's full of all the like air pockets in the bread. If you eat sourdough, you'll know what I'm talking about, but that means it's risen really good. Well, this bread is like that and it's so good. So I wanted to share it with y'all. The recipe that I put out before, I still like that recipe and I still make it. They just make different types of bread. This is a more like, it's got the crusty outer and then soft inner like bread like sourdough, classic sourdough is. It's super good and you can bake it in loaves. You can bake it in like a round loaf, any way you want to do it. So I just wanted to share this with you. Like I said, go back and check out that earlier video. That's just a different recipe. It involves more ingredients, but it's not hard either, and it's really good too for especially sandwiches and stuff. But I want to share this one with you today. So come on with me to the kitchen. Okay, so the first step to this, or really any sourdough recipe, is to feed your starter. Because once you get to your recipe ready to make it, you're gonna need a certain amount of sourdough starter. So you have to have split your starter and fed it enough to have whatever your recipe calls for. So, and another thing I wanted to say, because I've had this question a few times. When you put your sourdough starter aside or you put it in the fridge, some dark, sometimes almost black liquid will rise to the top and people will wonder, is that bad? Is my starter gone bad? That's totally fine. It'll have a really yeasty smell. Just stir that back in. You can dump it off if you want, but it's not necessary. Just stir that back in. And then I'm gonna take about half of this. This is not any precise measurement. I just take about half the starter and always leave half so that I never run out of starter. So my recipe calls for 1.5 cups of sourdough starter. So at this point, this is what I always do and it always comes out about right. I will feed, if it's calling for 1.5 cups sourdough starter, I will feed half of that in flour and half in water, and that'll come out to about 1.5 cups. So that means 3/4 cup flour, so I'm just gonna dump that in, and 3/4 cup water. And then that's gonna make my 1.5 cups that my recipe is calling for. So I'm just gonna dump that in, stir it up, and I'm doing this in my KitchenAid mixing bowl just because, to conserve dishes, because this is what I'm gonna mix it in later. So I'm just gonna go ahead and let this do its thing in this bowl. So you should get this in a couple hours. This should really start bubbling. That's the sign of a good starter. So this should start bubbling. And then later this afternoon, this is mid-morning, I will come back later this afternoon and mix the bread up. So I'll be back with you after this has set and done its thing for a few hours. Okay, so it's been several hours and it's time to proceed with our sourdough bread. So if you were with me earlier, I fed this sourdough starter 3/4 cup flour, 3/4 cup water. It's been sitting all day. It's nice and bubbly. That's the sign of a good sourdough starter, and we're ready to go on. So there's just a few ingredients. This is so easy, it's just ridiculous. The first thing I'm gonna add is 7 cups of flour. Now, if you're gonna buy white flour, make sure you at least buy unbleached and unbromated flour. And I'm just gonna be honest with you, I love buying whole wheat berries and grinding them myself in my Wonder Mill. I showed you a video on that before, but my family still loves white flour. So this is white flour. It's unbleached and unbromated. It's about as healthy as you can get if you're not gonna eat whole wheat. So you need 7 cups of this. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll mix these half and half. For today, I'm just making it out of this, but a lot of times I'll do half of the unbleached, unbromated white flour and half whole wheat flour. Sometimes I do all whole wheat flour, so they're pretty good about just taking whatever I bake. So, all right, also, you need 3 cups of water. So I'm gonna use my filtered water here. All right. And the only other ingredient is a tablespoon and a half of a good quality salt. So this is Redmond's real salt that I get from Azure, and just about a tablespoon and a half. Sprinkle that in there, and that is all the ingredients, y'all. I know that's ridiculously easy. Like I told you, there's only 3. It's flour, water, and salt. And you may say, well, it's got the starter in it. Well, that's just flour and water. So it really is just 3 ingredients. Okay, this is where a KitchenAid mixer comes in really handy because it's going to do all the work for me. At this point, if you don't have one, you can stir. But if you do, I use this dough hook and it does a marvelous job. So I'm going to put that on. I'm going to turn it on low. I'm going to bring you over here to see it. So I'm just going to let that mix. And there's times I have to add a little more flour if this stays way too runny. And there's times I have to add a little more water. So once it gets going a little bit, I'm going to click it up a little. If you just turn it on real high at the beginning, you could have flour go everywhere. But I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to kind of scrape down the sides. Okay, I just had a blonde moment. I'm going to be really honest with you. And no offense to blondes, by the way. But I thought that was a 4-cup measuring cup, so I only put not quite 2 for my 7 cups. And I was thinking, why is this so runny? This is not working out, and it's on camera. And it always works. But that was a 2-cup measure, so I only had about 3 cups of flour. So I stopped it, and now I have 7 cups of flour. So let's go back to mixing. Okay, so at this point, you can put it in bread pans, you can put it on a big pizza stone. If you're gonna put it on a pizza stone though and bake a big round loaf like you buy sometimes, you're gonna need to make sure it's thick enough, because I put one on a pizza stone that was way too runny and it ran all the way out to the sides. And it never rose a lot because it spread out way too much. So you could put something like a springform pan or something like that that would contain it if you're gonna put it on a pizza stone. But if you get it thick enough, I think it'll be fine putting it on a pizza stone. I put mine in loaves. That's just what I like to use. Let me show you. These are the pans I like to use. They're at Norpro. They just work great. They're my favorite bread pans. So this is what I'm gonna put it in, and this batch will give me 3 loaves. So I'm gonna line the bottom with parchment paper because it's sometimes a nightmare to get sourdough bread out of a pan like this if it's not lined with parchment. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so what I do is I just rolled this out and tore it off, and then I'll just tear little pieces. You don't have to do this step if your pans aren't prone to stick. But sourdough to me seems to stick more than other bread. So this doesn't matter on the size of the papers, I just need some little pieces. All right, now this is what I'm going to do with it. This is the part that's wanting to curl. I'm going to put it in there like that. And I'm going to put it crossways like that. It does not have to be perfect. I'll kind of fold down the side. Just a little bit when I get the dough in there. It's going to hold it down, obviously. And that is going to keep it from sticking on the bottom. And that'll be perfect. And then I can grab these sides and pull it right out. Okay, like I told you, absolutely by no means do you have to have a mixer to do this. You can use a big wooden spoon and mix this up. You're gonna get an arm workout if you don't have a mixer, but it absolutely will work. Now, I just divide this into 3 semi-equal lumps of dough. And if you haven't tried sourdough, you should. It's a lot healthier. It's already started breaking down some of the anti-nutrients and things that give you digestive problems about bread. I'm not going to try to convince you that if you can't eat gluten at all, you can eat sourdough. I am no doctor, and that is more than likely not true, because if you have celiac or something like that, I'm not trying to say that you can eat this bread, but I do think this is a healthier form of bread if you're gonna eat bread and if you can eat wheat. So, and to be honest, we've been eating it for a while now and I prefer it. Emily actually does too. She'll go places where you can order sourdough. That's what she'll order. She loves it. I'm not trying to be real particular because this is gonna rise and it's gonna kind of fill this pan on its own. So it's about supper time, so I am done with this. I'm gonna cover it with one of these flour sack towels right here, and that's just to keep any flies or anything off of it. And I don't have to do anything else with this until in the morning. Okay guys, so it's the next day and the bread has risen nicely. It was a cold night last night, and however cold your house is gonna determine how quick this bread rises. So I actually got up this morning and went ahead and turned my oven on because we're not running our heat or anything yet. We're just using a little fireplace, so it's not super warm in my house. So I went ahead and turned my oven on. It's been sitting on the top of the stove, so it'd go ahead and rise some more. Let me show you it. Okay, so as you can see, it rose nicely. Sometimes in the summer, if it's really warm, it'll rise all the way out of the pans, but this right here is about perfect. And I've heated the oven to 400 degrees. Let me show you a little secret down here. This is a cast iron pan covered in enamel, and it's just got water in it. It's creating steam in there. So I'm gonna shut that for a minute. The point of the pan is if you like that crunchy crust on sourdough, that steam is what's gonna give you that. So if you put a pan on your bottom rack full of water and it creates that steam source throughout the whole baking time. Now don't put just a little bitty bit in it baked dry. That's not good for your pan and that's not gonna accomplish what you want. But if you have a pan of water in there and let it steam the whole time, you're gonna get that good crunchy crust like is on what I call artisan sourdough, old world type sourdough, that crunchy on the outside but soft in the middle. And that's what I'm going for when I bake this type of bread. This is the type of bread I actually like for sandwiches. I like that crunchy crust. Emily does too. Now the boys sometimes want like a softer crust. So I have another recipe out there that I put out on an earlier video that accomplishes that. But this is gonna be that crunchy, good for dipping in soups and chilies and stews and things like that. So don't let Ben hear me say that word. But anyway, I'm gonna pop it in the oven and I'm gonna bake it for 45 minutes.